Oh, hello, beautiful patrons. I decided I was going to use this medium of my laptop on my lap, shaking wildly on Hangouts, to practice for the commission on mandatory national service that, for very strange reasons, I was asked to speak at. And I was asked by very polite, very nice people who have very interesting ideas to explore about whether people are, property of the state or not. But they Googled me, so they know exactly what they're getting with me. What I hope they're getting is someone who can deliver a sort of vehement and oh, what's the word? Withering message while still being respectful, because that's sort of the libertarian dream, is to get the in there without being without being sort of LouRockwell.com blogs. At least the Lou Rockwell of last time I checked, like 5 years ago, not the one that used to publish people who were actually good. Anyway, I'm gonna just read what I have right now, and it's a little bit long because I'm going to be given 5 minutes, and I'm going to have to do things like practice not saying and I'm probably going to do another version of this where I, sit up straighter and stuff. I should practice entering the room with great confidence, things like that. But all right, let's pretend I was introduced, and here we go. Dear Chairman Heck and members of the Commission, I appreciate being asked to offer my perspective on the question whether any kind of national service should be mandatory for Americans. I'm a working journalist and editor. I have more than 7 years studying and writing on two issues: criminal justice and foreign policy. Both of these topics have an application to the question of today, because they relate to peace, choice, freedom, and punishment. Namely, mandatory national service does not support peace. It certainly does not involve freedom or choice, and it is a punishment for a crime not committed. So it is with great respect that I intend to spend my time describing why the answer to should service be mandatory is no. Mandatory national service is a solution in search of a problem. Like any people anywhere at any time, Americans have their share of problems, but that is nothing that mandates grand central planning. An 18-year-old has spent 12 years in school and 18 with their parents. The door to adulthood is opened and they are urged to step through. Grabbing them by the arm and dragging them to a time and place selected by a bureaucracy will not help them become grown-ups. Teaching them it's time for them to leave their hopefully loving parents and make their own choices in life until the government comes calling is a mixed message. How many hand-wringing headlines and sarcastic memes do we need about kids today before we realize that just like any other human being, kids today are trying to find their own paths? If we believe that younger generations, mine included, as well as so-called Gen Z, are being infantilized and are permanently stunted and lacking in the skills of adulthood, why would we advocate for a program that tells them where to go, what to do, and for how long? The Commission has noble intentions in trying to make the country better, to encourage people to be a part of something greater, some selfless cause. However, noble intentions do not make great policy. More importantly, is even a good idea good if it's mandatory? Mandatory not for children who need a bedtime, but for young adults who already have their own plans, ideas, and dreams for their lives. Mandatory for young adults that, again, are constantly being mocked for being sheltered and weak on one hand, then being bossed around on the other. When pondering this kind of question, equality always demands to be part of the equation. In 2019, it feels strange to make men shoulder the responsibility of selective service registration alone. Women make up a fifth of the military. Perhaps they should be part of the group that will go when others are called to war. Restrictions on women and gay individuals have been lifted. Perhaps the commonly understood draft, if it ever came to one again, should cover men, women, gays, trans people, and everyone else, a perfect cross section of America. Perhaps then, if conscription is to be equally applied, so should this idea of national service apply to all people, at least those of draft age. The argument has been raised in various ideological corners, too, that an all volunteer military makes wars easier for Americans to ignore. Most Americans are more disconnected to foreign policy than they ever have been before. They know fewer people in the military. F- Furthermore, economic pressure would be less of an incentive for people to join the military in the first place. It was simply something every person had to do. These concerns about equality are all valid, but a grand experiment in coercion is not the way to fix inequalities. Abolishing the coercive program in question, in this case the Selective Service itself, is the better answer. During Vietnam, the last war in which men had to serve, over 60,000 of them died, to say nothing of something like 2 million Vietnamese. A quarter of those men were officially drafted, but unknown numbers joined up, only to be able to pick their military branch. The fact of the matter is that the classically defined conscription says one thing to young men: you are the property of the state, and you will kill and you will die to prove that. Furthermore, though the picture of 1960s anti-war protests might be appealing to those who wished for a more humble American foreign policy, the reality is that though the draft led to a backlash against the war, these 60,000 Americans and 2 million Vietnamese died before it stopped. The draft is immoral even in times of war. During the endless war on terror, well, now that's now, isn't it? The draft says that your desire to live and your principles against killing another human being can be revoked at any time. They are not. Translating its coercive elements to a more benevolent form of top down action may make doing your bit more palpable. However, the principle and the application risk being one and the same. The argument that the citizen owes something to the state has taken varying forms across history and geography. Its darkest iterations are those that have denied completely that the individual is a category at all. Only individuals make choices. The choices include making families, working, and joining groups. Sometimes individuals voluntarily join a cause or cause that they or others believe in is in service of the country. Sometimes that looks like joining the military, the Peace Corps, or just cleaning up a park somewhere. Social pressure from school, work, or family can influence these decisions. However, the reality is that the individual has the first and final choice in what they do. With respect, nobody, not this commission, not any bureaucracy anywhere, knows what's best for anyone else, no matter how young or inexperienced they are. And again, when you stake a claim in a young person's life during peacetime, that is what we have in America, you have them on the hook during wartime or any national emergency as well. Washington, D.C. is very far away from most Americans. Even their state or local governments are probably unfamiliar and, in most cases, unaccountable to their wishes. And hey, you might argue that that's the problem. There is the issue right there, and it can be solved by forcing a large cross section of people to work together for a greater purpose. Plus, polarization and politicization and a lack of respect for diversity and etc., all of this could be solved. Things may feel more tense and divided in America today, and, and forcing groups of people to work together could mandate a certain amount of cooperation by default. It will not fix the larger problems we have and the larger questions that arise about race, gender, sex, politics, and everything else while we all live together. Some people might enjoy this process of forcible commingling. Some people might be appalled and resistant. Why start at the premise of coercion, mandatory action, an idea that the young owe something to the government or at worst are its property? Why do we start with force if this idea is good enough? A greater purpose is a lovely thing. It is also a subjective thing. And a purpose is not great simply because it involves a large group of people all doing the same thing. More to the point, individuals need to find their own purpose. And when they don't choose that greater purpose, that's okay too. That's their prerogative to be lost, to play too many video games, and to wonder where they fit into life. If it isn't, what's the point of them having a choice at all? America prides itself on being exceptional, in part because of our constitutional protections of individual freedom. Passing a, nation, Passing a nationwide mandate that would control the lives of 35 million Americans, even if for only a year or two, would wound that deeply. In the words of the great abolitionist, anti war, Activist and proto-feminist philosopher Sanders Spooner, man no doubt man no doubt owes many other moral duties to his fellow men, such as to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, shelter the homeless, care for the sick, protect the defenseless, assist the weak, and enlighten the ignorant. These are simply moral duties of which each man must be his own judge in each particular case as to whether and how far he can or will perform them. Furthermore, this fatal conceit of believing in a centrally planned movement such as this is a dangerous one. In its most benevolent version, say young people working in homeless shelters or hospitals, it is still upending someone's life, controlling their location and their actions for a year or more. It is an assumption that you, general you of a commission or a board, know better than I, the young person who has my own ideas about how I wish to spend my life. Good, bad, selfless, or selfish, my life plans were mine and they have been taken from me. Someone presumes to know better what I should be doing, indeed, knows me so well they think they know how I best can serve the country. In its least benevolent version, this is a short term indenture of 35 million Americans. How will the practical applications even work? Will a certain number of these young people have to join the military? Will they be given half a dozen choices as to where they wish to spend their year, the way that men in Vietnam chose their branch? What stake will industries such as healthcare or defense or law enforcement have in this process? Will they lobby for the choicest, strongest, smartest candidates? Will the less impressive be sent to be janitors and ditch diggers? Individuals are not a resource to be picked clean. They will be treated as such under mandatory national service. There is no social contract. There is no equation that says exactly what I must commit to the local, state, or federal governments, or what we owe to our friends and loved ones. One thing's for certain, individuals know better than bureaucrats they've never met, and they owe more to their friends and loved ones than to bureaucrats they've never met. What we owe to each other is an important question that cannot be answered by government committee. What we owe to the state itself is easier to answer: nothing. I would happily give money to welfare, to immigrants, to other causes I deemed worthy. I do not get that choice. My money goes to wars and to a government that spies on me. Now my money could go for a massive program of quasi-benevolent, well-intended sounding indentured servitude. I would rather not work to fund that, much as I would prefer not to fund the federal government's other mistakes. When I was 18, I would have reacted to being forced to serve the state the same way I would react today, with disgust, anxiety, and anger. The best cause I could possibly imagine would turn sour if I were forced by law to participate in it. You might argue that this contrariness is the kind of immaturity that a program of national service could remedy. I would argue that this kind of contrariness is the American spirit, if such a thing exists. More importantly, it is the human spirit that relishes choice, freedom, and opportunity. That kind of freedom breeds greatness and ordinariness in individuals. Millions of people prove every day that whatever they choose, however their lives go, they should remain their own simply because they are no one else's. Okay, so as I read that out loud, I had some stuff I wanted to edit. And except for the part where I blanked for like 30 seconds because I could not for the life of me remember the word unconditional, that was weird. I want to try to read the whole thing through. It's they asked for a written thing, which that is a version of, and I wish I could edit a million times more. It's one of those things that felt so important that I sort of didn't give it the time it deserved. But I also have to spend 5 minutes reading a statement, and 5 minutes is about 750 words, and this is like way more. This is 1,800 words. So I got to really parse that down into something very snappy, and read it nice and slowly and clearly and hopefully subtly, witheringly. That's the dream. At this silly commission thing. And then after the alphabetical experts, which is apparently me, read we read our statements, the panel will ask us questions and the public will be there. It's an American university, so it's not like it's, at Congress or something, but this is still totally wild to be asked to do this, to basically be asked to deliver a classier version of rants that I've written for Counterpunch and Anti-War and Reason in the past. But I'm still going to work on this, and if any of you, handful of people, out there watching, if there are such people, have any feedback, or tell me what bits actually work. Um, you can let me know. I think the middle is where it drags. This commission is going to have later hearings about the actual draft, and mine is should mandatory service be, should national service be mandatory? So the draft thing is maybe too much of a non sequitur. I was trying to smoothly integrate it but I haven't gotten there yet. And especially for my speaking statement, I maybe should cut that out. But, if I get to quote Lysander Spooner and sneakily quote Hayek, something that I read to a quasi government commission, well, my work here, my friends, is done. And so, guess I'm going to practice this thing again once I cut it down more. So if anyone's riveted by this process, I guess they'll be able to see that. And I'll probably do that when I'm less tired as well. But I'm always tired. So anyway, yeah, the answer to should we have national service is no. Jesus fucking Christ. What kind of a question is that? But see you the end of the month when I try to deliver that exact sentiment in a much classier fashion. See you later.